What's up, crafters? On today's video, we are going to be talking about the different kinds of crochet. And this is for my benefit as well as yours. And I figured I'm gonna do all the research. Now, I'm probably gonna miss some, but I'm in my research. I'm trying to find as much different kinds of crochet because as a crochet artist, I realize there's a lot of crochet styles I still have no idea about. Still have no idea about. So, um, if you're new to crochet and you know nothing about it, crochet basically uses a hook instead of two needles to crochet a piece of yarn into a pattern. And it uses, and I'll give you the basic stitches. I'm sure there are a lot more, but in the basic stitches you can have a single crochet, a half, a double crochet, a double crochet, a treble crochet, and I think it's a double treble crochet are like the basic stitches. And from there you can do a lot of patterns with. And I'm going to get into what some examples that I have here, and then I'll put a picture up here of some examples of different types of crochet. And the first one is the one I'm most familiar with, which is like colorwork crochet. Now, this is like, you can do tapestries with it, you can do mosaic, you can do Intarsia. I'll show you an example of a couple of them. So the first example of, now I will say I watched this great video and I'll link it below where she explained the different types of color work, and so I'm gonna do a brief synopsis because I have examples of it. So the first example of color work, like this would be considered a tapestry project because you're using two things of yarn and you're running the yarn. I don't know if you can see it, but the yarn runs through the project. When I did this, this is a very old project, so don't mind how it looks. When I did this project for my daughter when she was really young, I didn't know a lot about crochet. I didn't know a lot about tapestries, but usually you find a pattern, right? And tapestries are usually most often done in single crochets. It can be done in other things, but most often tapestry is done in single crochets. And so this is a tapestry pattern, and what makes tapestry different from a couple of other colorwork projects is that you're holding the yarn in between the two layers. Like there's regular like graphing patterns where you float the yarn. I've never floated yarn, so I don't have an example of like color work that is floating the yarn. But tapestry, what she said was like you're holding it down, which is why you're tapping it down, which would make these blankets a form of tapestry crochet. The other form of tapestry crochet is Intarsia, and I've done a couple of videos on this, but this is where you're using several balls of yarn in several places. So at one point I was floating the yarn in lots of different places using a bobbin, and the difference between Intarsia and tapestry is I'm not holding the yarn down for the most part. There are places where I did do a little bit of tapestry, and you can see it here because I didn't want to float so many different pieces, but for the most part each color is its own bobbin and you're coming back to that color. I did a whole vlog video of me doing another one of these Intarsia crochet tapestries where you can see how many bobbins I'm running at a given time, and so that you can have an example of what Intarsia is. But definitely you have lots and lots of bobbins running around, and you're picking up the color and then dropping it off, and then on your return pass you're picking it back up and dropping it off. So you're not tapping it down or holding it down and just switching colors in the middle. You're dropping it, pick up another ball. So like if I had a ball of black in one area, I have a different ball of black in another area. So that's kind of what the Intarsia technique of color work is. Now there is the mosaic, which Granted, I have yet to try, so I will explain it because I have looked it up because it is on the bucket list of things I want to do, which actually kind of formulated this video because I wanted to know what other kinds of crochet were there, because I hadn't heard of Mosaic until I found a content creator named by Crochet Jess. I think her Instagram is Crochet by Jess, but her actual name is Jess. I'll link her thing in the back. And she does these beautiful mosaic crochet. And with that is like, you are not doing a return pass. Everything is from like a typewriter. If you know about typewriters, it's from one side to the other, one side to the other. And every line has its own color for the most part. Now you can do a little bit of color changing in the middle if you wanted to. That would add you more but the traditional mosaic crochet is one color each line. Traditionally, you can add a second color, and she goes over how you want to do color work in mosaic in her video, so I'm not going to go over there, but definitely one color at a time. And to get a second color on the next line, like say, oh, I was supposed to have a red in the line previous, well, the graph that you will use will have some X's, and the X's will tell you when to drop down from a single crochet to a double crochet in the previous row, because a lot of it is done in the back loop only. So if you're not comfortable with doing crochet in the back loop only, this technique is not for you. And there is another type of crochet which are aerial. I would suspect that motifs are what I would say normal tapestries were, which are the ones that have the color running through the back. Those are not really traditional tapestries in the Colorwork series. So I don't have an example of motif to show you because, like, again, I said, I don't ever float my yarn. I've never floated my yarn. I don't know how to. I mean, it looks complicated remembering what side is the wrong side and which side is the right side. So and you would think Intarsia is more complicated, but I'm so used to it, or doing tapestry, that it's not a problem for me. So those are the basic kind of like tapestry, the different types of color work you can do in using, they usually use pixel graphs. So each stitch represents something, and each kind of, I mean, you can intermingle the tapestry and the Intarsia. You would just have to know when to carry, but you can usually intermingle those graphs. If you're using a form of a mosaic, that kind of graph has its own way of writing, because it has X's all along the graph that tells you when to drop down from a top row to a previous row. So that is a lot of the color work you're going to get into when you're doing it on the same plane. The next kind of crochet I want to talk to you about is the typical granny square. Everybody loves the granny square. I'm not one of them. I do like the granny stitch. This is considered the granny stitch, where you see little clusters of three double crochets in a cluster. This is a granny stitch. Now, if I would have done this in a square, it would have been a traditional granny square, but this is a hexagon because I used it to make a hexagon pattern cardigan. So the stitch itself is the typical granny stitch, but I used it to make a hexagon. So this isn't a square, but had I done, instead of the 8 corners, had I done just 4, it would have been the granny square. So I have yet to do a project in the traditional granny square. Now, I've done projects where most people would consider it like a granny square. Like you saw, the blanket would kind of be a tapestry granny square project, because most granny squares are small squares that are put together. I have an example of small squares that are put together to form an item, and this is my Christmas blanket, sweater. But none of these are done in the traditional granny stitch. Like you have one that has, again, a granny stitch, but not the granny square. So I don't have an example to show you. I'll put a picture up here of a traditional granny square, and maybe even a traditional granny square project, what you would use those for. Most people use them for blankets. Some people use them to make um jackets, pants. I've seen baby blankets. I've seen a bunch of things used with granny square. It's the crochet is universal. Like, most people do granny squares. I'm not one of them, but most people do. The next kind of crochet is Tunisian crochet, and Tunisian crochet requires a special Tunisian hook. I have a hook that can be used for Tunisian. It's a nooking crochet hook. So I have like, it's a nooking hook which has a hole in here, and I can attach a line so that the line floats to a certain amount, and I can leave the line for the return pass, because Tunisian crochet is closer to knitting, because except for you're not using two, you're using one, which thankfully, because I can't. I could barely get going with the crochet, and adding a second stick, I don't know how I would do. But Tunisian crochet, I think, would be the closest thing to like uh working it like a knitting project, because you're going forward and then you're doing a return pass. You're doing a return pass with the same hook. Some Tunisian hooks are longer so that you're using it on the same hook and just pushing it to the back. This, like I said, this is a nooking hook that I have for Tunisian crochet when I'm ready to start. There's also the one that's circular needles. They have that have two, and then they have one that has two hooks, one on each side, and those are for going forward and back with in the round, I guess. There's a lot of Tunisian crochet differences that are different from regular crochet, and I will link artist who is very popular on YouTube, TLC Yarn. She does a lot of Tunisian crochet projects. I have yet to start my own. That is another one on the bucket list for me to start for Tunisian crochet. The other type of crochet there is amigurumi, where you're making stuffed plushies into items. And so I have, obviously I've done ami before, and a lot of it is using in the round. Most of the time you're crocheting in the round. There are some times that you're not crocheting in the round, but most of the time for ami you're crocheting in the round, and a lot of it is done in the round. And you're making plushies with it. Most people, you can use, most people do cotton weight yarn, chenille yarn, or I myself use worsted weight yarn for some of my crochet projects. I'll put a picture up here of some of mine. And amigurumi is just basically the art of making like stuffed plushies using crochet, and obviously I have done that. The other kind of crochet there is doilies, which require like lace type yarn. I haven't gotten into doilies. They were used back in the day as like plate centers, table runners. Doilies are not a thing I've gotten into, but I will put an example of a traditional doily here. There's also, if you're gonna be using like that fine weight yarn, there's also Filet crochet, which also uses graph patterns as well. Typically it's done in one color. I don't think I've ever seen a Filet crochet done in multiple colors. And you're also using a graph, and in their graph, like at a certain point you do 3, I believe, don't quote me if I'm wrong, I believe you do, when you see the graph pattern, when it's time to do the pattern, instead of doing the big stitches in the middle, you're doing like 2 or 3 crochets to signify that you filled in that like color block for that. And usually it's done with a lacy yarn. Sometimes it's white, sometimes it's black. You want a contrasting color. So like if I was going to use this white wall and put a Filet crochet item in front of it, I would use like a darker yarn. But if you're using like a darker item underneath, you're going to want a lighter yarn. That like typically that's how Filet crochet is done with with patterns as well. There is also lace, crochet lace. I've never done anything lacy with crochet, but you can, if you wanted to, you could definitely crochet lacy items. I've done the other kind of crochet you have is called beaded crochet, where you're adding like color beads and beaded work into crochet. I've also not done that. That is not one I'm interested at the moment. Who knows? Maybe later on I will be. And the last example of, and now I'm sure there are plenty more types of crochet, but the next one I want to talk to you about is corner to corner. Now, this one can be used with a graph, or you can just go from one corner to the other. I've done my first corner to corner project this year for my son's birthday blanket. I'll have a picture up here of probably the in process of me making it, where I used a graph to make it, and I did his in like a full size blanket for his bed. And typically you could put use patterns, and you can do color work with corner to corner. You do not want to be carrying the yarn for the most part. You kind of want to definitely do more of an Intarsia technique when you're doing corner to corner, because there is no wrong side usually. I mean, you could have a wrong side of a blanket, but it's a blanket, and you don't want to get stuck on those little things where you're carrying the yarn. So I think those are all the crochets that I've seen. I will link the website that I looked up a lot of like the types of crochet there are. If I'm missing some kind of crochet that you do, put it in the link below, and maybe I'll make a part 2 of all the different crochet that I discovered through you guys, because I didn't know the different kinds of crochet. And again, I said I am not a noob, but I'm very new to the different types of crochet. I am very like in my tapestry world. Everything's on a pattern, everything's in a graph. So I am now like spreading my wings and trying to find different types of crochet that I would like to try. Like definitely Mosaic would be one of the ones on that bucket list. Corner to corner was, but again, I did it at the beginning of this year, so now I don't have to worry about it. Oh, I have a video where I show you the corner to corner blanket, but you'll see it here, me working it. But thank you for watching. I hope this helped you. If this helped you even a little bit, even if you don't subscribe, if you leave a like on the video, that'll help me immensely. And thank you for watching. Happy crafting. I hope you find a new crochet style that you want to try. Bye.